Welcome back. It's Beyond the Box Score. I'm Dan Schneier. That's Jacob Gibbs. And 496, that's the number today, boys and girls. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the number of new subscribers on this here Beyond the Box Score channel. We need to get that number over 500 within seconds, minutes. We need to get that number over 1,000 within days. And I got plans and ways to do it, Jacob. They don't call me the plug god for nothing. But today's show is not about our subscriber count on the brand new Beyond the Box Score channel. Today's show is about winners and losers at every position from the early parts of free agency period, because this free agency period will roll forward for another few weeks. I always like to look at it, Jacob. There's that first wave, that second wave, and I even think a third wave of free agency. Trades are still going to happen. That's what I believe. I think we're going to be headed toward a very heavy trade period, especially after this first wave settles in and teams kind of get an idea of what their rosters need. Today, we're going to do statistical deep dives on what these moves might make. And again, just going to talk a little bit of football with my boy, Jacob Gibbs. I want to ask you one thing before we get into any of that. Of all the free agency moves, which one, as a Chiefs fan, are you most excited for?
Yeah, man. Kenneth Walker, obviously, fans of Beyond the Box Score know that he's been one of my favorites. I think he's such an easy guy to root for. I fell down a Kenneth Walker YouTube content rabbit hole last offseason. I've watched every touch that Kenneth Walker's had over the past 2 years. And so to finally get a running back who can actually add to what's a pretty good ecosystem, they've been pretty effective running the ball with, we've got some stats on it. We're going to do a deep dive on Kenneth Walker in another video, but they've been able to move the ball on the ground, even with two of the worst, to be frank, below replacement level type runners in the NFL.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean to throw any shade at Kareem Hunt. He's been really effective for the Chiefs in short yardage situations. Isaiah Pacheco obviously is a fun story and runs really hard, but now the Chiefs have a legitimate threat, a big play threat, a guy who has really had to work through pretty tough circumstances with the Seattle offensive line, a lot of different play callers there. And now finally, I think has arrived at a spot where he's paid and he could put up some huge numbers if he's healthy. So I'm super happy for him, super excited to see how that goes in Kansas City.
I didn't mean to jump the order a little bit because we're going to talk about the biggest free agent contract, the running back in the running back market as well first. But we might as well just dive deeper into this Walker situation as we move forward, because I think there's layers to it. First of all, Seattle sits here with Zach Charbonnet having torn his ACL. We don't know when he's going to come back. We don't know if that's a week one thing. Walker gone. And a lot of the backs coming off the market that we're about to talk about. Where do you think the Seattle run game moves forward with just, losing Walker to free agency, Charbonnet's injury, and also the change in offensive scheme, losing Clint Kubiak? It's not necessarily, in my mind, at least, a run game I'm jumping for joy to kind of chase, because while, there was certainly some improvement on the offensive line, specifically with Gray Zabel, the draft pick, who was an unbelievable, almost all-pro player in his rookie season. It did feel like there was a lot of scheme that went into them creating so many yards and creating so many opportunities. So where do you think they go from this point?
I think they're probably going to add a rookie. They've been pretty conservative with their money, so I think that makes sense that they'll go that direction. I really like Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame, and I think that he could be a good fit for them, a potentially good complement for Zach Charbonnet down the line, somebody who can create explosive plays. So that makes sense that maybe they will target someone like that. I could see Rashad White or something like that landing there, but yeah, just kind of waiting to see. That's the most wide open backfield right now. But it hasn't, Charbonnet is there, I know it's going to be probably a slow recovery because he had a late season injury, but it hasn't been a super fruitful backfield for fantasy. The offensive line still has some questions, and we don't know exactly what the play caller is going to be. So it's not one that I'm really, really excited for. And it might end up being, it kind of reminds me of Pittsburgh, where it's it might end up being kind of split up among a few guys, or Arizona, where it's kind of a low value backfield already. And if I had to guess, it's kind of going to get split up between a few guys. So we'll see. Maybe it ends up being one guy who gets the bulk of the work. And if that is somebody like Jadarian Price, who has some juice, that would be exciting. But I'm just kind of waiting to see what we get there.
And there were 2 or 3 players in last year's draft class that you and I had ranked so far above consensus ranking. And one of these players who, was one of the only players since 2022, him and Ashton Jenney, to force over 100 missed tackles in a single season, in a college season that was. This player we thought should have been a second-round draft pick was a fourth-round draft pick, and then scored 8 touchdowns in like a span of 7 games. Cam Scatterbo for the New York Giants. This is great news for him, man, because look, I almost feel like the Giants signaled what they wanted to do even before free agency's tampering period when they restructured and kept Devin Singletary under contract. They got Singletary, Tracy Scatterbo. They haven't signed any of these running backs yet, including Ken Walker, who they're rumored to be the front runners to sign. This could be big news for Scatterbo's fantasy stock moving forward. Obviously, we have to figure out where he's at from a health standpoint. And, the thing with Scatterbo is with that kind of injury, we really hope, like, he's not somebody who relies all so much on his athleticism, but he needed the level he had to be as effective as he did. And I mean, the lateral agility, that explosiveness, that ankle flexion. But he's supposed to be back for early OTAs. And if he looks himself and we start to see that, Jacob, I think we'd be talking about a big fantasy season for Scatterbo.
For sure. Yeah. So I'm throwing up on the screen here. Here is the new YouTube channel. And we've got our playlists here. If you check out the 2026 offseason playlist, you'll see this ranking the 50 best rookie seasons from 2025, which was obviously a loaded class. And Scatterbo, I think, came in at 8th overall. He really had a great rookie season, but you and I were worried with the Kenneth Walker buzz that maybe his recovery wasn't going so well.
Right.
If they were to go after Walker, and who knows, like maybe that still is the case, and Walker just wanted to go to the Chiefs and have a chance to, play with Patrick Mahomes and everything. So maybe we're not out of the woods with Scatterbo yet, but this is definitely a good start to the offseason. If they would have signed Walker, it would have felt like he's buried. So he's one of the biggest winners. We're going to go over winners and losers at every position today, and I think you do have to kind of start that conversation with Scatterbo and another favorite of ours, another year 2 running back that we'll get to.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that player who's going to be a massive roster, a high roster number. What's the word for it? What am I looking for? When you roster a player to a high percentage, I don't want to say high ownership.
Exposure.
There it is. High exposure to that player for Jacob, I'm sure, and for me as well. But just on the Walker front before we move forward with the Chiefs, do you feel like the Bieniemy, the upgrade for, I'll call it an upgrade. I don't know if it actually is, but the upgrade from Matt Nagy to Eric Bieniemy is good for Kenneth Walker's value? Do you feel like with Patrick Mahomes, they can utilize him in the passing game in ways that we've seen flash with the Seahawks, but not a lot of commitment in my mind from Kubiak and the coordinators they've had before? Is that something you see? Like, where does is Walker someone who you can see being in that first, second round mix after all this?
You're saying first, second round for fantasy?
Fantasy, yeah.
That seems very rich because we haven't seen Walker be more than like a 60% snap rate guy at any point in his career. His rookie season is the closest you'll find in terms of getting that kind of usage. And now multiple coaching staffs have not wanted to use him that way, not wanted to use him on passing downs. It is an interesting situation here in Kansas City as it stands right now, where it's just him and Brashard Smith. Brashard Smith is a good route runner, can contribute as a receiver on passing downs, but is someone that they were very averse to using as a pass blocker last year. PFF charted him with only 2 pass pro reps the entire season, which is insane for somebody who played as much as he did. So the problem with Walker has been pass pro, and maybe he's incentivized to fix that this year, and maybe he's able to be a 3-down back, but we just haven't seen it. As far as Bieniemy, yes, I'm extremely excited for the fit there. I think what Bieniemy did for DeAndre Swift this past season is really, really incredibly encouraging. And it was truly a transformation season for Swift, who I think is similar to Walker in some ways in terms of spending a little bit too much time sometimes moving horizontally rather than getting upfield. And that changed in a big way with Bieniemy. So I'm going to give you guys some specific stats on that.
It's a great point.
An individual video that we provide on Kenneth Walker's outlook for the Chiefs. I did a deep dive on Bieniemy and the impact that he's had on backfields and how it could help Kenneth Walker. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. But we've got a lot to talk about today, so I don't want to get into the nitty gritty here with every single player because we could talk about Walker for 25 minutes, honestly. But he's going to get a whole video dedicated to him.
Yeah, so just a heads up for those who are new to the channel or those who are interested in what we have moving forward, we will have some individual profiles, as Jacob just alluded to. So for the deeper dive on some of these signings we're going to talk about, well, you can follow us along there. Now, I do want to say a quick bit of breaking news that just came in as we were recording, so you can just get Jacob's quick reaction to that and maybe mine as well. Isaiah Pacheco, the former Chiefs running back, is signing with, I don't know if you saw this, Jacob, but the Detroit Lions. So traded David Montgomery, and now Pacheco is going to potentially fill that David Montgomery type role.
Great news for Jahmyr Gibbs, in my opinion. I don't think Pacheco moves the needle much. And a stat that I just threw out on Twitter that I think people might find interesting is Jahmyr Gibbs is running back 2 in rush success rate on runs from inside the 5-yard line. Over the past 2 years, he's scored a touchdown on half of his runs from inside the 5-yard line, which is way above league average. It's a top 5 rate. So he's actually been really effective. He has the lowest stuffed rate in terms of like the percentage of his runs that gain 0 or negative yards on runs from inside the 5-yard line over the past 2 years. So I think we've seen Detroit, move more and more to Gibbs as the bell cow running back, whereas in the past they've felt a need to complement him with more of like a short yardage grinding kind of back. I don't really think that that's what Pacheco is. So
Right.
to me, this feels like Pacheco is just kind of a relief option, and we're probably going to see Gibbs unleashed, which we've seen at times as like a 70 to 80% snap rate player. And when he's been that, he's been the most productive running back in fantasy. So
Sure.
I don't know if the offense will be quite as good as it has been to facilitate that level of production, but yeah, it's him, Bijan, CMC up at the top. We're just absolutely loaded at the running back position for fantasy right now.
And I love when teams actually do that, when they don't feel like, oh, I have to bring in this plotter type in the goal line situations. Because the reality is in the NFL, you need to be you can't be one dimensional at any point. If you bring in these backs that are just specifically for certain situations, it just makes you so much less multiple in those red zone situations where you need to have a Gibbs out there. Because if you have Gibbs out there, you motion him into the slot and he can run an angle route, Texas route. You can use him out of the backfield on a variety of routes. So I do think he's proven, as you said, he can also be an effective runner down there, which is huge for his fantasy upside moving forward. It's going to be interesting this year, Jacob. There's going to be a few running backs at the top of those boards. And I feel like for auction and salary cap leagues, there's going to be a huge edge to those who actually spend up to get those backs. And they're going to have a big jump, a big, I guess, gap for me between them and the top receivers, just based on obviously what they can provide versus the rest of the field, Gibbs being one of them. All right, let's get into the other big signing of free agency at the running back position. And that's Travis Etienne got paid, man, the Saints. So this one was really interesting to me for so many reasons. Like one, Etienne, yeah, he's had like an interesting NFL career. Like to start, he was really good in a system that didn't, in my mind, accentuate his skill set, but then had a little bit of a drop off, one injured year, always has kind of been able to create and force missed tackles. Then last year he gets with Liam Cohen and he's really looking amazing. And now it almost feels to me, like Kellen Moore said, we're not going to have an opportunity to get some kind of big ticket free agent weapon from a tight end or wide receiver standpoint. Let's do the next best thing for our young quarterback and let's get him a weapon out of the backfield. So I'm very curious about what your thoughts are on how this impacts Etienne, Tyler Shuck, this entire Kellen Moore Saints offense in year 2 of the Shuck experience.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about the Saints, honestly. Kellen Moore has proven multiple stops to be a really fantasy-friendly coordinator, play caller, play designer. I loved the designs that he was drawing up when I went back. I watched every Tyler Shuck drop back from this past year. I just think Kellen Moore did such a phenomenal job. And he's had some really good fantasy running backs at times, Zeke Elliott, Saquon. But like he hasn't featured the running back position. I feel like his impact has been more beneficial for the passing game, just from digging into Kellen Moore stuff over the past 4 years or so. So I don't want to get carried away with Etienne, but he's in a great spot here where he's probably going to be the bell cow. And if the offense ends up being good, then it could definitely be a surprisingly good landing spot. I wasn't like super excited about the Saints. I thought like the Chiefs might be a better fantasy landing spot for some of these running backs. But the more I like feel into this Saints situation, it just feels like as long as Tyler Shuck plays well, this has a chance to be a really, really good offense for fantasy. So the Saints also signed David Edwards, a guard from Buffalo, 4 years, 61 million. So that's a legit investment into a very good player. And if you look at the Saints line now, man, they've invested so much. He joins a line that has a first round pick at left tackle, right guard, and a second round pick at center. And they've all played reasonably well. The tackles maybe haven't played quite as well as their draft billing would indicate, but like they've not been busts. They've been fine. If you look at like PFF grades and all of that, like I think the line is better in pass pro than run blocking, but I think that fits well with what Kellen Moore wants to do here and can help Shuck to like just keep this offensive environment friendly for fantasy. So I'm really excited about it, and I think Etienne has the ability to play on passing downs as well. We'll see how the backfield shapes up, but there's a chance he's in a similar role to last year. I don't think it'll be as good as Liam Cohen's scheme in terms of boosting his rushing efficiency, But the role might be good enough, and the offense might be good enough that he still puts up similar numbers.
Yeah, I think you broke that down well. To me, the one that stands out, what you said that stands out the most is how low key underrated that Saints line is and was. We went back and spent so much time watching film of the rookies for our big rookie show that we did last week. And it was a lot fun watching this Saints offense. And I think you said it best. Like Kellen Moore did a great job of getting Tyler Shuck comfortable in quick game. Now, I will say this. I was definitely more impressed with what he did from a passing standpoint, design-wise, than a run game standpoint. But that's also with a lot of injuries to their backs. I mean, Kamara dealt with injuries. They then went to Devin Neal, who got injured. So maybe it's just all they needed was this kind of solidification in the run game with a player like Travis Etienne. So I'm really excited about that. Let's hit our first break. We're going to come back with some more running back signings after this.
You need a hug?
You need a fist?
Crutch, crutch, crutch.
Crutch, crutch.
Crutch, you need anything.
I do have one question.
We didn't mean right now.
All right. Other big running back signings. We've got Rico Dowdle to the Steelers. I do think that makes Jaylen Warren one of the biggest losers. For a while there, it was looking like Warren was going to make it through, kind of like last year.
Yeah.
And it might just be like him and Caleb Johnson and somebody else. But this is interesting. I do think it's good for Warren in the sense that he'll probably keep the passing down role. But I think Rico's definitely going to get the short yardage and might even just take some work. You know that I love Jaylen Warren, little buff boys all the way. I think he's one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL. But I think Rico is too, so he's legitimately got some competition here for early down work. And I don't feel great about the offense. I think best case scenario, this is like a middle of the pack offense. So that's kind of a tough blow for Warren. I don't think I'm overly enthused about Rico either. But he's been good, man. He's been good. Obviously, people saw the bell cow games last year. And then also he's been the most effective running back in short yardage situations and at the goal line over the past 2 seasons, Rico Dowdle. So I think he's going to have that role locked up. I have some other stats on the short yardage stuff that I think is interesting. Another short yardage back that's been like kind of annoyingly relevant over the past couple of years for Bijan Robinson fans is Tyler Algier. And so he's finally moved on from Atlanta, which opens up, Bijan to potentially even have his role expanded. I don't know how much better it can really get because I think the offense is capped a little bit in Atlanta, but Algier ends up going to Arizona. And I think this is a really interesting backfield potentially to take cheap shots on. I'm curious where your head's at. So we've got Algier with the Cardinals. Trey Benson is still there. And then they also restructured James Conner, so he'll be there as well. And James Conner, he's aging, but he's somebody who we've seen always play at a high level when healthy. But Algier has also played at a really high level, and I just wanted to hit on that. So over the past 2 seasons, rush success rate on running back runs, 44.7 for Bijan Robinson, one of the highest rates in the league. Algier's is 45.7, which is actually higher, which is crazy. And I was like, well, maybe that's just because Algier gets so much short yardage work. And success rate, for people who don't know, is like getting a first down, basically. Depends on the length needed, but getting first downs and touchdowns really is like how you boost your success rate. And so short yardage runs often help that. But even with the short yardage runs removed, so on runs where you need 3 or fewer yards, if you remove those runs, he still has a higher success rate, 40.7 on non-short yardage runs, 40.7% for Algier, 39% for Bijan. Only James Cook has a higher rushing success rate on non-short yardage runs over the past 2 years. So that's an Atlanta Falcons stat. Their offensive line coach there has done great work, and they've been able to move the ball successfully on the ground. But also Algier has been really good. If you look at yards after contact per rush over the past 2 years, Bijan Robinson, 3.47. He's insane. That's third behind only Devon Etienne and Derrick Henry. Just behind him, 3.26 yards after contact per rush, Tyler Algier. That's 8th in the league. That's just ahead of James Conner, who's been really, really good at creating yards after contact. This one shocked me. Explosive run rate. So I'm talking about runs of 12 or more yards. Over the past 2 seasons, 8.8% for Bijan, 8.6% for Algier. It goes up to 10% if you remove short yardage runs. League average is 7.8%. So they've both been well above it. Algier's in the same range as Bijan Robinson. So again, that's runs of 12 or more yards. Dan, guess what Tyler Allgeier's longest run is over the past 2 years.
Oh, man. 36?
25 yards.
Oh.
So you know exactly what you're getting with Allgeier. It's kind of like Connor. Connor has had a little bit more juice to get the long runs, but Allgeier is grinding out gains and can get you 10, 12 yards, but is not giving you big gains. I think Trey Benson is their clearest path to those type of explosive plays. But Allgeier is somebody who can do more than just grind out short yardage. I think he's proven that. He came in and rushed for over 1,000 yards as a rookie. So I think he's a legitimate threat to just lead this backfield if I had to take a shot on one of them. But that I also don't want to sleep on James Conner. It'll all depend on where his health is at this point in his career. I'm curious, what's your read on the backfield at this point?
Yes, I'll start with both of them because I don't want to go too fast over Dowdle, because Dowdle's situation was the most interesting to me because I felt from the tape that I watched and we watched last year, Dowdle was the most underrated running back on the entire market. I'm a little bit confused at how this running market has played out, specifically with Dowdle getting 2-year deal for $12.25 million versus a player like Allgeier getting Allgeier 2 for $12.2 million, similar player, but what was the one? Oh, Dobbins 2 for $20. That one surprised me a lot to see that difference. I thought Dowdle was clearly the best on tape of those three. Allgeier is a player who scares me for fantasy moving forward. Look, I like some of the stats you brought up, yards after contact, ability to make people miss in a phone booth, but he was playing in that wide zone scheme in Atlanta with really good blocking and consistent offensive line, and even better offensive line coach to teach wide zone, and also benefiting from playing behind Bijan Robinson. While that, will not help him from an overall fantasy standpoint production-wise, it does give him the benefit of the doubt, being that cleanup, got change of pace back after Bijan Robinson already wears the defense down. Now he's going to have potentially a lead role. What I think about with that situation in Arizona is what's going on with the health of Benson or Connor, because there's only one reason to make a signing like this. It's either you don't believe in Benson, his ability to stay on the field, his training after injuries. That was a big thing that we saw with Brandon Ayuk in San Fran. He did not do the right training after the torn ACL and everything kind of collapsed. You have to be in the building, you have to be in the facility, you have to be listening to them. And the doctors, they're going to help you get right, but you have to, follow this strict plan. I wonder if something like that happened with Benson, because it was a really odd year with him last year. And then Connor, on the other hand, an older back who's had another major injury. That's what would get me excited about Allgeier, if those two are slow to return. Other than that, man, I'm not overly excited about this offense not getting Malik Willis. I'm not overly excited about a Mike LaFleur offense with their offensive line talent. To me, this could easily be one of those backfields in that situations, like I told you last year with Cleveland, that I just avoid altogether. Now, the Dowdle thing is a little more interesting to me because the Steelers' offensive line really took a step forward. They made a lot of investments. Some of it is Arthur Smith. He always signs good run games. He's not going to be there anymore. But ultimately, Dowdle, with the skill set he showed, if he can kind of take over more of a lead role, and who knows, maybe he'll fall back into the situation we saw in Carolina at the end of the year, right? And it's kind of Dowdle and Jaylen Warren in similar roles. Then it's not as fruitful for fantasy, but at least there's some intrigue there for me, especially given his talent.
Dowdle is definitely interesting. He has played well. I was surprised by the Dobbins contract as well. I'm curious how much or if hardly any of that is guaranteed. It'll probably all depend on how available he is. I think, Allgeier is interesting here. I agree that playing in a different system could make him just, replacement level guy, but he's been so dang good, man. And I think he's good on film too. I liked him in college as well. The reason that Puka Nacua had lower numbers than people might expect was, one, because he got hurt a lot in college, but two, because he's playing in this offense where they just gave Allgeier the ball every single play because he's so good, man.
Right.
So I don't want to sleep on him. I think he's an interesting bet for fantasy if he's going to be really cheap. He's probably the running back I would take shots on from this backfield, if any. Maybe it won't matter. Maybe the Cardinals will just suck. But I mean, if they are going back to Jacoby Brissett, we saw that this offense could be decent for fantasy under him in those circumstances.
With that sig, and not to disparage LaFleur.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm excited about LaFleur, and what that could be. So
Maybe.
that's where I'm at. Is if it's cheap, I think that this is an interesting way to take shots on maybe LaFleur being one of the surprise guys. One of these offensive play callers that comes from the McShanahan trees and is actually pretty good for fantasy. So That's
The
I
one
would
time
take
he did call plays, now I don't want to bury him for it, but the one time he did call plays with the Jets, it was really ugly. And I remember just
the
watching the
Jets.
breakdowns. Yeah, it was the Jets, and like you're not working with any talent whatsoever. But I'm not like certainly sold that the Cardinals have all this much talent. Though I will give you credit for what you said because Brissett was talented last year. I love Michael Wilson, and maybe Marvin Harrison can figure it out at some point.
All right, let's focus on the Atlanta side of this. So
Yeah.
Algiers out of the picture. Algier had an identical number of carries from inside the 5-yard line to Bijan Robinson last year, which I do think is criminal.
Yeah.
Bijan on carries from inside the 5 since entering the NFL is running back 1 in success rate, running back 1 in EPA. Per rush, he scored 16 touchdowns on 30 carries from inside the 5 over those 3 years. During that time, only Rico Dowdle has a better conversion rate. So he's been so good when given the rock in scoring distance. He's been splitting that work. So we'll see how the backfield shapes out here in Atlanta. But I do think so much of it was just that Algier had like earned the respect of the team and the coaches. And so he got some of that work. I don't think it was necessarily like an indictment on Bijan. Like they thought that he was bad in those situations.
Right.
So I'm pretty excited to see if this role expands for him. Again, it's ultimately probably going to be capped a little bit in terms of how many of these scoring opportunities we actually get in Atlanta. I just don't feel great about the quarterback play there. But maybe it'll be better than I expect. Maybe Stefanski brings some like stabilization to the offense there, and Bijan just can clean up in scoring distance. Because I think, yeah, we're looking at like as many touches as he can handle, right? Like we're at that point in his career, and I think this past year proved that he can handle it.
Yeah, I love the stat you just brought up. It just goes to show, like, what is the upside for Bijan Robinson if you're drafting him, or do you feel like you're drafting him at his ceiling? You're not, because the ceiling is likely much higher if he's going to be getting a lot more of those opportunities. I don't see any way he can't at this point, Jacob. Like, unless a veteran prize loose from the running back position and Atlanta feels the need to sign him, which I don't think will happen. Most likely the route is going to be, either a day 2 or more likely a day 3 pick at running back, who they're probably going to be excited about and want to get worked in eventually, but not early on when they can't handle blitz pickup, when they don't know the system very well. So those first 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks could be like a fantasy gold mine for Robinson if the offense can stay on track without their offensive line coach, without the wide zone scheme, and more importantly, if Tua is playing, because speedy recovery for Michael Penix Jr. I wasn't a huge fan of his tape. You weren't either, but one thing he can do is hit his back foot off play action and rip an in-breaker to Drake London or to Kyle Pitts and help the offense move by just having that verticality to it. If Tua gets in there, it just I'm really nervous for what that offense could look like, even for Bijan if Tua's in.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about some winners and losers here at running back. For me, the biggest winner so far, we'll see what happens with this backfield over the rest of the offseason, but it's Bashal Tootin.
Yeah.
For Jacksonville. We've talked about him on that rookie show that I mentioned, where we went through the top 50 rookie seasons. And so I went and actually dug up the actual data, because I mentioned on that like just having watched his rookie season, it felt like so many of his touches were short yardage runs. And they really liked him in that role. And so that affects his actual total efficiency numbers, because it's really hard to get an explosive run when everybody knows that the run is coming and everybody's crowding the line and you just need 2 yards, so I didn't want to like ding him for getting those 2 yards over and over and over. That's important for the offense, and there's a reason he kept getting those runs. So here is the actual data on Tootin. He was used as a short yardage back on a fourth of his carries, 25%. For comparison, Travis Etienne was used that way on 14% of his carries. So that's an abnormally high rate for a running back. I'm talking about runs where 3 or fewer yards were needed to gain a first down. And he was really good on those runs. He had a freaking 81% success rate on those runs compared to 54% for Etienne, 50% for LaQuint Allen on those short yardage runs. He had just a 19% stuffed rate, which again is 0 or fewer yards gained on these short yardage runs, 28% for Etienne. So he's clearly really good in these situations, and he ended up getting a lot of them as a result. But like if you look at the overall Tootin profile, it's a very small number of runs, and people like point towards, yards per carry and explosive run rate and stuff like that. And it's like, I just don't think that's really fair when it's already a really small sample. And, we're now cutting it down to 3/4 of that small sample. If you throw out the short yardage runs, that's a really small number. If he had just a few more explosive runs, that would really drastically influence his rates. I remember halfway through the season, people were pointing out that like Travion Henderson had the worst rates in football. in terms of efficiency, yards per carry, explosive runs, all this. And then he broke off some explosive runs. And it's like, well, now he has some of the best rates in football, you know? So I just wanted to point that out for Tootin. Like on non-short yardage runs where it was not a run where 3 or fewer yards were needed to gain a first down, Tootin actually had a slightly higher explosive run rate than Etienne. So to me, it feels like in year 2, if his role is expanded, he could give us some of these explosive runs. Maybe he's more comfortable in the offense, second year in the system. A lot of people have speculated that he was really concerned with ball security, and they were just like really hammering that home for him because that was a thing in college. And then he fumbled during the preseason. And so, yeah, I don't want to overreact to the rookie year where we didn't get the explosives that we wanted from this really electric athlete, you know, and say that he's not good or he has bad vision or he can't be an early downs back or whatever. I don't really think that makes sense. So to me, he's the biggest winner so far. We'll see how it shapes out in Jacksonville. I know you're extremely bullish on him and the upside there with Liam Cohen.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for me to not draft Bashal Tootin this year because I'm going to trust what you talked about, what we saw on tape at the college level and what we saw on tape at times with Jacksonville. I remember we went over a few of the games this year on BTB. I can't pinpoint which ones. We broke down the tape and we were like, this looks good for Tootin. And it took a long time this season. I don't remember what game it was, Jacob, but you would just kind of pile it up on Twitter, or X, I should say, of, look, not a negative run for Bashal Tootin, another game without a negative run. And then finally it came at some point in the season. But his ability to create behind the line of scrimmage, his vision was always on play, always at, on play. That's not the right word. Always at play at Virginia Tech. And then that one cut ability to go. In addition to the things you broke down, like there were some positive upsides from his rookie season. It wasn't all negative based on the lack of explosive plays. So I don't ultimately know what they're going to do this offseason at running back. It could, my mind could change if they make a big investment in the draft. But as long as they don't make a big investment in the draft, I'm going to trust Liam Cohen to be one of the better run game designers in the entire NFL. And if they do, vice versa, make a big investment on offensive line in the draft, now I'm even more excited about Bashal Tootin's upside.
Yeah, holy crap, man. Yeah, I totally forgot about the positive yardage number. It was like half of the season he like had not had a single negative run, including the preseason.
Yep.
Yeah, Bashal Tootin. I don't think it was a bad rookie year. Again, check out that rookie breakdown where we talked about the top 50 because there's a lot of interesting details on each of these rookies. All right, moving on with the rest of our fantasy winners here. We already talked about Cam Scadaboo. I think he's one of the biggest winners so far. I think him and Tyron Tracy make sense if they're healthy as like a totally fine 1-2 punch in that offense. And so we'll see what they do with the backfield going forward. But so far, it looks like a clear winner. Jonathan Brooks, I wanted to bring up as one of the biggest winners, in my opinion, that we need to start taking more seriously as like a legitimate breakout candidate here. Jonathan Brooks was so good in college, but it was a small sample size, and then he got hurt again. And so people have like kind of totally forgotten about him, written him off. But I think you're going to hear a lot more steam about Brooks coming up. And so in Dynasty, it's like trade for him now. He's cheap. If you don't feel great about the rookie picks this year or whatever, I do think he would be the clear-cut RB2 in this draft class. And he's in a situation here where Rico Dowdle has moved on, so it's just him and Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard has shown that he can be susceptible to losing work. I think it's realistic that Brooks can take the lead back role. He can play on third downs, and he could contribute as a receiver. So I'm super excited about him. The coach speak on him has been really, really encouraging in terms of his recovery and how athletic and strong he looks out there in practice. Jonathan Brooks, unless Carolina makes a move, but there's not much left at running back. You know, we're going to talk about who's still available at each position. Aaron Jones, Rashad White, Brian Robinson, Joe Mixon. Are any of those names scaring you off?
No.
If they're added to the backfield, like not really. Maybe Rashad White because he has a very specific skill set and would be able to like play the passing downs. But I feel really good about Jonathan Brooks and think he's one of the best buys in fantasy right now. Kenneth Walker.
Dynasty.
I think he could.
Even for redraft.
I think he'd be very relevant for redraft if the Panthers are decent.
I'll do one quick concern there, and then I'll let you get back into this. My one quick concern is a lot of injuries to the same like different areas of his body, but just a lot of injury pile up. I kind of want to see the explosiveness still. And then mostly for me, it's like I thought Cade Mays was one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the entire free agent market. And the Lions it's clear the Lions saw the tape and loved the tape. Like a lot of what he's able to do on the move in the run game is what I thought, or at least what I felt. Remember early in the year that Panthers run game was not working for fantasy, and then they broke out midway through the season. I thought Cade Mays played a big role. He went to Detroit to the Lions, and he's going to be there, which I think is going to be a huge upgrade. Yeah. I don't know what the Panthers are going to do to replace him just yet, but just a concern there at center.
That's a good point. He had some really, really good games this year. Like when Rico Dowdle was really rolling, a lot
Right.
of it was him just dominating. I think Kenneth Walker and Etienne are two huge, clear winners here. Their value is clearly going up. Etienne, I guess if he would have stayed in Jacksonville, like maybe, but even there, he has more threats, I think, than he does in New Orleans. And like we mentioned, we're pretty excited about the offensive environment there. I think Algier is a winner here because he's not with Bijan, so he at least
Right.
has more of a path to getting some work. I also think James Conner is a winner because he could have. It looked like he just was going to get cut and end up washed up somewhere, but like he's got a chance to come back and be the lead back here. Bijan and Gibbs, we've already hit on our clear winners. I think Ashton Genty deserves a mention because
Oh yeah.
we're like, where's Linderbaum going to go? And ended up being here, so we're pretty dang excited. That was probably the top free agent on the market, like any position.
Yeah.
Really, really important piece there to help get started on rebuilding that offensive line. David Montgomery, clear winner from the free agency and draft or like offseason period here. And then I don't know if this is fair to put RJ Harvey as a winner because they did pay Dobbins and Dobbins did outplay him at the beginning of last year. But just because they were linked to bigger name running backs, I think it makes sense to at least mention him here, where he's going to have the clear passing downs role if this is the backfield as it stands right now. And Dobbins just has not been able to stay healthy, So it's basically like last year, but maybe Harvey plays better in year two. So I think the light's still on for Harvey, where I was a little bit nervous that it might be like, okay, that didn't go so well. And now he's the clear backup on a middle of the pack offense, which would have been kind of a death sentence for fantasy. But I think he's still alive.
He's alive. I have such a tough time figuring out his value and outlook moving forward. Just based on what we talked about in the rookie show last week, it's like I liked him when he was in space and he was explosive, but I just really didn't like his tape processing behind the line of scrimmage. And I'm almost concerned the Broncos didn't because they like 2 years, $20 million is a lot. It's a major investment in Dobbins, even if some of it isn't guaranteed. And I think you suggested that, and you're probably right. It just seems like if they were sold on Harvey taking over more of a lead back role, they would have went through the draft at running back.
Yeah, I don't think they were sold. I don't think there's any
Yeah.
reason to be sold that he's going
Right.
to take a lead back role. That would have been a real surprise if that was the outcome this offseason. Losers at running back. I've got Bucky Irving. We'll see, but like Kenneth Gainwell just is when Rachaad White left, I was hopeful that Bucky might get the passing down work because
Right.
he's been really good in that situation. And their new offensive coordinator came in and was talking about like using him as a receiver and all the ways that he's used Bijan Robinson. Maybe that's still live. Maybe Kenneth Gainwell is just a backup, but that's what Kenneth Gainwell was supposed to be last year. And Jaylen Warren was playing really well. And all it took was like one injury to Jaylen Warren, and Gainwell got in and immediately scored 30 fantasy points.
Right.
And he ended up being like more productive than Jaylen Warren for fantasy. Like he had a really low key good season, and he has a clear skill in being able to play on passing downs. So that scares me a little bit for Bucky. Also, losing Mike Evans, I think, really sucks for the offense. If you look at their like EPA per play without Evans, it's a significant downgrade. Maybe Jalen McMillan and Emeka Egbuka are good enough to fill that void in terms of spacing the field with a downfield threat, but I just think Evans is such a good real life player. I'm a little bit nervous about the offense. Jaylen Warren, Woody Marks, Trey Benson were the other clear losers for me. Do you have any winners or losers at the running back position that I didn't hit on?
Winners we went over, and I agree with you on those. Losers, just a couple dynasty losers for me. Caleb Johnson with the Steelers. That's a really rough break for your dynasty value. A 2-year deal for Dowd, who's a much better player. Probably drafted Caleb in round 2. Your dynasty drafts, rookie drafts last year. I don't know where to go from this point. I think it's just a hold and pray situation. Same goes for Benson for me, man. Like I had high hopes when they drafted him, the Cardinals, and I thought there was some explosiveness I liked about his game, even at the pro level and the limited snaps, but multiple injuries, didn't come back on a good recovery timeline last year, and now they sign Algier. So those are like the two biggest dynasty losers for me.
Yep, makes sense. All right, let's hit our second break here. We'll get back and get into the wide receiver news and free agency market here.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, I think the biggest news so far, clearly at the wide receiver position, is what's gone on in Indianapolis. Alec Pierce gets the bag, and then they also trade away Michael Pittman. So this is a super small sample size, 127 routes over the past 2 years. But Alec Pierce, without Michael Pittman on the field, has averaged 3 yards per route run over the past 2 years with a 14% first down per route run rate, which I think is really relevant. because, he gets so many downfield looks. But like the first downs, like it's just one first down when you get a 40-yard gain. So like his first down per route rate is higher than anybody other than Puka Nacua. It's like I said, super small sample size, but he has proven to be a really productive player. There's a reason he got paid so much. And I just think the data without Pittman on the field is pretty encouraging. Pittman is a legit target magnet over the past few years. Like when he's been healthy or just when he's been on the field at all, they've run the offense through him, but then they're willing to move on from him, which I think is really interesting. Definitely encouraging for Pierce, who we know is going to be out there all the time. I think it's encouraging for Tyler Warren as well, and potentially for Josh Downs. So now we're looking at a really tiny sample size, 65 routes, but his target per route run rate, which we already know is insanely high, goes all the way up to 32% without Pittman on the field. And maybe this leaves open an opportunity for Downs to be more than just a slot guy who comes off of the field in 2 receiver sets. I remain dubious on that. He weighs 170 pounds, and they just have not shown any willingness to use him in 2 receiver sets. I think he can do it. I think he has the ability to beat press coverage. He's been really good when pressed, and I think he has the ability to go win jump balls. Like that was a clear skill of his in college that's translated, even though he's really small. So wanted to mention these two, the clearest winners so far of the Pittman trade. And I don't really have any thoughts on Pittman to Pittsburgh. Do you? I think it's just kind of like in a void for me with him and Metcalf.
I'll have some intrigue in Pittman if Rodgers comes back, just because it feels like, just from what I've seen throughout my life and my time analyzing fantasy football and football with Aaron Rodgers and with Pittman, they're a nice fit skill set wise. But let's wait to see if that even happens. And even then, it's still an offense that I don't trust as much. Though I will say this, like, Mike McCarthy is going to help that pass game. I don't care what anyone says. Maybe their run game takes a step back. Mike McCarthy will help that pass game. He is a much, much better schemer and a much, much better visionary on how to win in the pass game than Arthur Smith ever will be. So I'm not as opposed to that. But with the Pierce front, it's super interesting to me because not only that, Jacob, apparently, at least according to reports, Pierce turned down more money elsewhere to re-sign with the Colts for an already insane number. Just goes to show, like, the NFL was a lot higher in Pierce than all the people who made fun of this potential market that he was going to receive. And we were kind of on to why. When we broke down his tape this year, we really liked his ability to win. Now, I will say this. I do think he was aided in some way just by playing that boundary receiver role on a team that had really good run game, really good offensive line, and really good kind of motion around the line of scrimmage and different personnel groupings to give a lot of eye candy around this, to keep a lot of eye candy around the line of scrimmage, meaning like safeties have to look downhill, safeties have to come downhill, giving these one-on-one looks for Pierce. But he won in a variety of ways. He won on inbreakers, outbreakers, deep comeback, deep curls, and then vertical routes. Like the whole route tree on the outside that they ask of you as a boundary receiver, he won consistently doing it. He can high point the football, make great catches away from his frame, and he's got speed. Like he's a much better actual receiver, I think, than people realize. So to me, you talk about, you're like, look at these numbers without Pittman on the field. Pittman's gone. They traded him. We could be in for even more of a breakout season for Pierce. Of course, it depends on a few things. One, can Daniel Jones come back healthy? Two, can Daniel Jones look a lot more like the early Jones than the Jones we saw after, over the last few games, like specifically that Chiefs game and the game before, a few games before that, I saw a little bit of regression in the Colts offense. But Jones is playing through an injury. So it's important to note that as well. If he's fully healthy, there's definitely some upset there. And I just want to shout out the listeners right now. We did hit the 500 subscriber number during the show. Thank you so much. It's early BTB off season. We need to get that number a lot higher. We will. So I'm excited for you guys to be here for the journey. And thank you so much for those of you who hit the subscribe button already. And please, if you haven't already, hit the like button. We really need you to do your best to just click that like button throughout every single show. Leave a comment both before, during the live stream, and then after as well. Help us boost that number. Jump the algorithm. There's a hype button now too on YouTube, so you can help us there as well.
Yeah, I love what you hit on with Pierce in terms of like all the environmental stuff helped, but that's all intact still. Like I do feel we feel really good about what they were able to do there schematically. And so it comes down to Daniel Jones' health. But if he's able to play, I think that this is a really good situation for Pierce again. And then the other thing that I think you hit on that's really important is like his ability to win on end breakers and just all the stuff that like doesn't make the highlight reels, like with Pierce with all the downfield jump ball stuff. He's become more than just that. In college, he was kind of just that at Cincinnati and early on in his career, but he's won more and more and more with consistency. And I think that Indianapolis's moves this offseason suggest that they believe that his skill set can continue to be fleshed out and become like kind of like a true wide receiver one. Like you don't often see perimeter bound X receivers operate as the wide receiver one in the offense. So maybe Downs and Warren step up and do more of that short yardage stuff. But I do think it stands to reason that his target rate will go up, and that he can maybe handle more and more of those intermediate, win versus zone type of looks that Pittman had been doing, in addition to just the downfield man beating press coverage type of stuff. What I've found really interesting about Pierce for fantasy and just the way that he's used is that he's been not very involved at all in the red zone, which surprised me for somebody who's so big and strong and athletic. But that's been the case his whole career. And so like maybe that is another area where there's growth potential available to him. And that would be huge for fantasy. Like last year, I remember we were pointing out like halfway through the season, he still had no touchdowns, even though the offense was playing really, really well. And he was clearly playing better, but he was just flying under the radar where he's averaging like 2.5 yards per run, but has no touchdowns.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what if those get added? What if he does start to score more touchdowns? He could be a really interesting player for fantasy. How high do you think the ceiling realistically is? Like, say Jones is healthy and it's kind of the environment that we saw last year without Pittman.
I mean, the numbers look good as you broke it down without Pittman, but ultimately I do feel a little bit, I want to say like, it's mostly like, am I trusting that offense to ever really operate through Pierce, which I'm going to say no to, just based on everything I've seen from Steichen and ultimately Jones throughout their careers. I still think that offense is going to operate through the run game first and through quick, easy solutions in the passing game, which necessarily doesn't benefit Pierce to a major extent. I think it does come down to what you said, like, will there be more of a red zone role? Ultimately, that to me falls on Daniel Jones more than anyone. So I'm high on him because he's such a good player, but I'm reserved on moving him into a tier of some of these like receivers we're drafting in rounds 1 through 3, for example.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just put a poll up. We'll see what the chat thinks is like.
Because I have an even bigger winner for wide receiver for this free agent period.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, I put a poll up on the Arizona running backs. Who's going to lead in the fantasy points? 5% of the votes for Trey Benson. People are just done with it.
They're done with Benson. Maybe trade.
Sad.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious who your big winner is. The other big signings so far are like Mike Evans to San Francisco and Rashid Shaheed being back with Seattle. I haven't seen anything. Wan'Dale Robinson, I guess, is a big signing with Tennessee. He got a lot of money. Is that who you're talking about?
No, but he will be good for fantasy. Good fit there with the scheme with Brian Daboll. Tons of short targets coming. Explosive thrower with Cam Ward. Could be even bigger role and a lot of slot. Like he showed what he showed at Kentucky. He finally was able to put on display what he showed on tape at Kentucky and was never used to do with the Giants until last season. That's Wan'Dale Robinson. The slot vertability that will improve with Cam Ward out there. It improved with Russell Wilson and a little bit with Jameis Winston. And I think Ward is an even more explosive thrower than Jackson Dart is. But my big winner is Mike Evans, man. I think it's going to continue to be an ageism thing. Just like last year when I had Devontae Adams ranked so much higher than consensus. I think it was like 7-8 slots ahead of where consensus ranking. I think a lot of the problem was just the age. And the Stafford back thing definitely made people a little queasy about investing in Rams receivers last year. But Mike Evans, if you look at the numbers, like 2024 came and people were like so shocked to see the numbers, like, wow, this dude can still create separation with the best of the NFL. And if you look at the 2025 numbers, he was still up there when it came to separation and just winning his routes. Sure, he had an injury-plagued season, but it wasn't like a knee injury. It wasn't like any kind of lower body injury. He has that, like, as far as I'm concerned, he's never really had major injuries to the areas of the body that maybe will sap his athleticism moving forward, like a neck shoulder type injury like he had. That's healed now and he'll be good to go. And you just look at the difference in red zone efficiency for the Niners versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In my opinion, Evans went there because he thinks he'd get upgraded quarterback play. I would agree with him in that regard. I think the system fit is unbelievable there with Shanahan's system. So to me, I feel like it's going to be a very similar situation to Devontae Adams last year, where he's old and people aren't going to want to draft him. They're going to remember that he was injured last year. And ultimately, you're going to get him at a nice little value. And so I feel like he's the biggest winner at wide receiver.
Yep, I'm on it. I told you guys that Dan and I, like, we're going to give some of these more specific player breakdowns, and I've got a ton of details on Evans that I think are relevant.
Good.
So he's one we're going to do. But yeah, to your point about Evans, like fantasy points data, their charting has him as like one of the best separators in the league,
Right.
which I think is really relevant because Devontae Adams, like you brought up as a corollary here, he's also had really good separation scores, and I think it goes overlooked a little bit. People feel like he's fallen off. If you look at like his yards per out run, they've kind of dipped later into the career. That's the case for both of these guys, and it's like, well, that's what we see often, and so this is like the age cliff. But I just don't know if that's the case with Evans. I think that is kind of rushing to a conclusion when really we have a really small sample size last year of Evans playing. And so, like, what I've got here, 30% catch rate on throws of 15 or more air yards for Evans last year. The years before that, it was 54%, 52%, 51%, 55%, 57%. The lowest rate of his career is 43%. It was 30% this year. Baker Mayfield, we pointed this out a lot, really did struggle on these downfield looks. You know who has been money on downfield looks is Brock freaking Purdy, dude.
Exactly.
I don't know if people realize this. QB2 in highly accurate throw rate on throws of 15 or more yards, air yards in 2025. QB2 in highly accurate throw rate. That's per fantasy point status charting. QB5 in catchable ball rate last year on throws of 15 or more air yards. QB5 in that stat in 2024 as well. And yeah, Kyle Shanahan can definitely scheme up some open looks for a downfield receiver. We've seen that time and time again. We'll give more data on that in the Mike Evans video. But as long as his hamstrings hold up, man, I think things look really, really good for Evans. He is, I think, the biggest fantasy winner. I think you're right there. I think Pierce is close behind him. Downs, you've got to mention. And then the Tampa Bay guys. If Baker is able to play better, if Zach Robinson helps the offense, maybe. I think Jalen McMillan is really interesting and somebody that's completely forgotten about. Jalen McMillan, dude, he returned to the field in week 15 and ran more routes than Emeka Egbuka in week 16 and 17 when the season was on the line and they're trying to make the playoffs. He had more receiving yards over the past month of the season in those final 4 games as they're trying to make the playoffs than both Egbuka and Chris Godwin. He averaged more fantasy points per out run through 2 seasons. So the past 2 seasons, he has more fantasy points per out run than DJ Moore and Jordan Addison, tied with Jacoby Myers. His career fantasy points per out run is 0.34. It's 0.35 for Marvin Harrison Jr. for comparison through his first 2 pro seasons. So like, this is a player who's been sneaky productive for fantasy. It is obviously, I think, reliant a little bit on play calling with Liam Cohen, getting him some open looks his rookie season, and Baker playing a lot better that year. But like all of his per route data was better in year 2. And I think he's a really interesting player to buy in Dynasty with Evans gone. If the plan is just like Godwin, Egbuka, and McMillan, I think he's going to be on the field a lot and could be a guy who creates splash plays if Baker plays better.
I'm with you on McMillan. I loved his rookie season tape. Obviously, the neck injury was scary. We don't know what happened, but he made it back onto the field last year and looked pretty much himself and made some big plays. So it will be dependent on Baker kind of refining and regaining his form in another new system. But I'm excited about that one as well.
All right, last one is Wan'Dale Robinson. I do think is a winner
Yes.
here. I ultimately I do think the ceiling is probably capped because he's not really a big threat to score touchdowns, and now he's going to an offense that's probably going to be at the bottom of the league in expected touchdowns. But it was a good year for him. He had a career best 0.4 fantasy points per route run. That's higher than some really, really good players. Devontae Smith, Alec Pierce, Tedero McMillan, Josh Downs, Jalen Coker. Like he had more fantasy points per route run than those guys last year. And then if you look at the past 2 years when Malik Neighbors has not been on the field, his target per route run rate is 27.5%. That is extremely high. And now he's going to Tennessee with the same exact play caller who's like spammed these looks to him.
Yeah.
And with a quarterback who I think can make any throw and, was desperately in need of a reliable check down option. I do think that he'll be the designed like out for Cam Ward on a lot of these plays if the first read isn't there, and they might even run some stuff to him. I mean, Daboll has loved running these like 3rd down plays to Wan'Dale, as frustrating as it's been to watch him consistently not convert on them. So yeah, I think in PPR leagues, Wan'Dale, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but if Wan'Dale's healthy all year and Cam Ward plays better than expected, Wandale could easily be like a top 15 receiver. I don't know if he's going to give you like way more than that. But I think something like that is within the range of outcomes where he could just have 130 plus targets and just pile up yards and catches. Worth mentioning.
We just saw it happen. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think when you draft him, it's always going to like, so I think if you're looking for easy profit in the draft, Wan'Dale Robinson can fulfill that need for you. He's just given his profile and everything that he's done so far in his career. He won't be drafted at high and he'll most likely return value based on that in PPR leagues. But it's just going to be a tough one, I think, for you and I, Jacob, because the way we draft fantasy football is we try to look for league winners, and we're not looking for small profits. We're looking for the big profit with the chance to lose more. And Wan'Dale will have a much lower chance of losing on the bet you make on him because of the reasons you said. I think they ultimately did sign him for so much too, because they were like, look, we need an easy. Dable's like, I watched the tape of Ward in year one. Everything they asked him to do was not easy. And I think you mentioned that last podcast when we broke down the rookies. Like, it just felt like both the Giants and Saints had a much better plan for Dart and Shuck than the Titans had for Cam Ward. And maybe Dable looked at it like, I can do that. I can have a good plan for Ward, but I need to have an outlet like Wan'Dale Robinson. So I think you're spot on with the target numbers. It's just a matter of, will they be able to regain? Like, the reason Wan'Dale had the numbers you see, and you mentioned a few minutes ago, were like really influenced in my mind by a 3-game sample size, 2 with Russell Wilson and 1 with Jameis Winston. If you take those games out, it just doesn't look the same. Can Ward get to that level from a downfield throwing standpoint? It was always his weakness coming out of Miami. You and I agreed on that when we watched his tape, the downfield throwing. And you even said it on the last show. There were a lot of accuracy issues on the downfield stuff last year when you rewatched Ward. So I don't love that fit, but I do like the fit from the short area target standpoint.
Yep. Okay, we'll finish up with our losers here at receiver and then go through quarterback and tight end. Not a whole lot of changes at quarterback and tight end, but there are some interesting names to point out here and talk about. And then we'll be done. And we've got more free agency news coming, so we'll be back on Thursday with another episode breaking down the whole free agency period and everything. Looking forward. So the other losers to me at receiver are the Pittsburgh guys. I think they'll just eat into each other too much. So that's Pittman and DK Metcalf. I think your point about McCarthy is valid. I think it'll be a better environment for receivers than Arthur Smith. But I think the ceiling is really capped for both of these players. And then I think Ricky Pearsall is a loser, potentially. We'll see. I think there's still potential for Pearsall to play well if he can stay healthy next year. If Evans gets hurt, then they're going to put him in a bigger role. And maybe Evans coming in like opens up space and we get to see Pearsall's role expanded because he's basically just been a downfield guy for San Francisco. And I think that he has the quickness to win short routes as well. So I don't want to just completely overreact to the signing here. It could end up actually being a good thing. The other one that I'm obviously sad about is Torrey Horton. Rashid Shaheed going back to Seattle. I think Horton's good enough that he could come back, and if he's healthy, he could just play his way onto the field just because he gives them something that nobody else does. But the skill set is similar, and they invested in Shaheed 3 years here. So that's tough to see as big Torrey Horton fans.
Yeah, and still behind Cup, still behind JSN on that roster with the likelihood it's a 49ers type style offense where we're just going to see a ton of like 12 personnel, some 21 personnel. It doesn't feel great for fantasy. Pearsall's the interesting one to me because I think if everything goes well for him from a health standpoint, Evans could in some ways help him, as crazy as that sounds, just by taking away attention and giving some of those like backside dig routes, like wide open space to run them. But a lot depends on like Pearsall staying healthy at this point, which he struggled to do.
Yeah,
even at Florida,
sure.
he had so many injuries too.
If Jawan Jennings doesn't re-sign,
Right.
I think it's totally available to Pearsall that he could have a big year for fantasy, especially if Kittle has like a slow start recovering from that injury. I think Pearsall could have some big numbers for sure. He's an explosive play waiting to happen. All right, let's talk about the quarterback and tight end moves. Probably the biggest one is Malik Willis to Miami. The chat's talking about Jalen Waddle. And I just have no idea what to think about Willis. I don't really see it as a win for Waddle. I guess it's better than like Quinn Ewers probably, or like just not having an answer at quarterback. This was, in a lot of people's eyes, the top quarterback on the market this free agency period. What I worry about with Waddle is just volume. So Willis, we've barely seen him play. We're dealing with tiny sample sizes here with all of the career numbers here. Only 209 career dropbacks. He barely got to play in Tennessee. And in Green Bay, when he's got in, Matt LaFleur has run a very specific type of offense that's been extremely run heavy. So in 6 career starts, the dropback numbers are 27, 25, and 17, 3 starts in Green Bay, and then 28, 22, and 15 dropbacks in 3 starts for Tennessee. So we've never seen him drop back more than 30 times in an NFL game. It might be different with them, investing in him as the starting quarterback here, but I do think like it makes sense that they're probably going to run a run heavy offense here with Willis under center. I think he could be productive, and I think people will be very excited to draft him for fantasy because of the rushing, but I do wonder how limiting this is going to be for the pass catchers. So he's only topped 150 air yards in 2 NFL games. He's made 6 starts. He's topped out at 280 air yards and 204 air yards. Then the next game is 140. So
And this is dating back through Tennessee, correct?
Yeah, but he barely got to play in Tennessee. Three starts Tennessee, 3 starts in Green Bay.
No, I know that's part of the problem for me, at least, just because I feel like the quarterback's so different, that version of what he had in Tennessee and what they're asking him to do. And it's like half the sample size is right there. It's I almost want to throw it out, those Tennessee years, but at the same time, there's so much extrapolation that goes on just to say like, oh, the numbers we saw in Green Bay, because if you're looking just on that small sample size, he could be like a superstar quarterback. So probably the answer is somewhere in between there, but I'm with you. There's so much uncertainty with Willis. He did look great though in the spot starts and like the moments he had with Green Bay.
I just don't this isn't. I think maybe one pass catcher can work within this. Like there's enough volume, but it's just like we're talking about the lowest probably projected pass volume of any team next year. I think it's reasonable that's where we're at. Maybe Cleveland, has less pass volume, but it's probably going to be projected for like near the bottom of the league in actual dropbacks and air yards and receiving yards produced. So I do worry a bit about the viability of Jalen Waddle or anybody here in Miami in terms of pass catching. As for Willis himself, you're going to see this all offseason, like these tweets with fantasy points per dropback and everything. Because it looks insane. So again, it's worth mentioning it's a really small sample size, 117 dropbacks in Green Bay. That's a tiny sample size. For some quarterbacks, that's 3 games, which is what he got. He got 3 starts and then a few games where he had to come in relief for an injured Jordan Love. But he averaged 0.8 fantasy points per dropback. You might see a higher number than that. This is like actually points per dropback, not including the designed rushing numbers. 0.8 fantasy points per dropback over the past 2 seasons, which is higher than any quarterback. Lamar Jackson's next at 0.75. Josh Allen is at 0.64. So it's a ridiculously high number. And this stat's been really prevalent and even predictive a little bit of future fantasy scoring at QB. I don't think we have a large enough sample size to say that it will be predictive, but it's at least a start, like he has been very good in this Matt LaFleur system. If you look at fantasy points per snap on non-running back runs, so I did it this very specific way because this gives you a slightly larger sample size that does include designed runs. So it's when it wasn't a running back run, so drop back or designed run for the quarterback, he's still number 1, 0.67 for him, 0.6 for Lamar Jackson, 0.6 for Josh Allen, 0.55 for Jalen Hurts, 0.5 for Jaden Daniels. This is the past 2 years. Jackson Dart was at 0.52 in 2025. So there's a reason people are going to be excited about Malik Willis. It is a small sample size, but what he's shown us has been extremely productive for fantasy because of the rushing. I mean, he's given you some huge numbers, 31.5 points, 25.4 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points are his numbers in 3 starts with Green Bay over the past 2 years. So I don't like how aggressive are you willing to be, do you think, with Willis in Miami? He's got some weapons. If they keep Devon Etienne, is he somebody that you are pushing up into that top 10 range? That's basically where we always land with this type of a rusher.
True.
I mean, Justin Fields with the Jets in a situation where we did not feel good about it. No reason to feel good about it. He was up at QB 8 or something this year in drafts.
Pre-draft rankings, yeah.
Anthony Richardson before that was like QB5 or something in draft rankings, just because this rushing upside is so huge. So is that where you think we see Willis?
Ultimately, I feel like the landscape has changed a little bit at quarterback, and there's more talented, or at least fantasy relevant players that he'll probably be more in that 13, 14, 15 range at quarterback. And some people view him as a breakout, and some people view him as a bust for the reasons you mentioned, which I think are the pass volume expectations. But I remain very unsold on either opinion when it comes to Malik Willis and this fit in Miami, because I could see it working out. Hafley brings him in. He knows him. He believes in him. He looks so damn good. And it wasn't like he just looked good for fantasy last year, I felt like, with the Packers. He looked good as a thrower of the football last year with the Packers, and understanding concepts from the offensive defense side of the ball, understanding defensive post-snap safety rotations. It seems like with LaFleur, he clearly took that step forward in learning how to play quarterback. Something we saw with Jordan Love too. Like, Jordan Love was such a raw player out of when he entered the NFL. So is it possible? Maybe. Still some questions about the Dolphins offensive line, not as much from a run blocking standpoint, but from a pass blocking standpoint. So I need more time on this one. I think
we're going to dig into his film more, guys.
Yes.
We're like later this offseason, I think it'll be in May. We're going to publish a lot of videos on the individual quarterbacks and what they did last year after we dig into a like deep dive into their film, basically look at every dropback. We've already done it for Tyler Shuck and Dart and who's the other rookie? I'm blanking right now. We're going to dig into all of them. To Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, Caleb Williams, and I think Malik Willis is something I'm going to add to that list too, because it's not that much film to watch really, because he hasn't gotten to play that much.
Right.
But I really want to see like how the mechanics have developed over the years and how the accuracy is, changed as a result. So definitely we'll be back with more detail on that. Okay. The other big signing from QB and tight end so far is Isaiah Likely. And I think it's relevant for him. I think he could be fantasy relevant because he's been a really good player. But also, dude, people aren't going to be excited about this, but Mark Andrews is looking like he maybe is going to be something for fantasy still, because the other one that is worth mentioning is Charlie Kolar left, and he's played a lot. And so I don't know, it's just a weird situation here where they're going to add to the tight end room surely. But Andrews has been really productive. So let me give the Likely stats first, and I'll compare Andrews to him. People are going to be excited about Likely because he's produced whenever he's been given opportunities. And now he's in a Giants room where Wandell is gone. There's a lot of targets vacated, and who knows where they go. I hope it's just feed Malik Neighbors as much as you can. But Likely is somebody who's been able to produce for sure. I think people are going to probably push him up to the top 12 range. His career fantasy point per route run number is 0.38. So that's tight end 11 over that 4-year span that he's been in the NFL. It's tied with David Njoku. It's just below Tucker Kraft. So when given opportunities to run routes, he's been very good. Obviously, it's with Lamar Jackson, but he's been very good. He was on a clear upward trajectory before the injury-riddled 2025. His fantasy point per route run number by season was 0.34, 0.36, 0.41, and then dropped all the way to 0.27 last year. So career number is 0.38. Really good number. Mark Andrews, his career worst number came last year, is 0.35. So still in a viable range, just below Likely, just below Tyler Warren and Brenton Strange. The years before that, it was 0.53, 0.49. He's getting older for sure. We've seen it, but like this has been one of the most productive tight ends in the league. He's still here with Lamar Jackson, and the Ravens have lost some pass catchers and have lost some tight ends. So if he's more like an 80% route rate type of guy, I do think he's somebody who could be viable and also has some upside. Like it's kind of like the Travis Kelce bet last year, It feels better to me than like TJ Hawkinson or whatever, where it's like there's touchdown upside. He could score double-digit touchdowns in Baltimore. That's definitely within his range of outcomes. So thoughts on Likely, thoughts on Andrews. Is there any chance that Andrews is actually a better fantasy bet? I don't think anyone's going to be drafting him ahead of Likely, but I could be wrong. We'll see.
It's interesting. I'm going to already come in higher than consensus on both, to be honest. I wouldn't mind either of them in fantasy at tight end. It's going to be a deep year for tight ends in the fantasy drafting market. It's going to be so much harder for me to want to take that plunge I took last year in auctions with Bowers and McBride, one which paid off, the other which didn't. Both cost a lot. And I'll start with Andrews, who you just benefit from the rapport that he's built with Lamar over the years. It's Doesn't go into, fantasy points data or any of these per route numbers, but it's just kind of something from watching a lot of football. When you have a rapport with a certain receiver, it makes a big difference when it comes to target volume, when it comes to that red zone ability, like understanding Andrews understands how to get open, especially against zone in the red zone, and Lamar and him have timing down. So I think all he needs to do is score somewhere in the range is what he scored in the past, which I don't see any reason why he wouldn't, to be a top 10 fantasy tight end. Likely is a different role, I think, completely. Like, while Andrews, I don't think will benefit from volume, he'll benefit from rapport and from the red zone stuff. Likely could be a major, major benefactor of volume here with the Giants. I think there's a reason they went out and signed him so early in free agency. Matt Nagy has proven he likes that power slot role more than the Wan'Dale Robinson skinny slot type role. And that's what likely is going to be here, because they have Theo Johnson still on the roster and they love Theo. So they're probably going to run a lot of 12 personnel, with likely being that power slot role. They don't really have a slot after letting Wan'Dale Robinson go. And then it comes down to, like, how do you see this offense moving? A big reason Neighbors was so fantasy relevant and so fantasy dominant as a rookie was because Dable designed the offense around one player, around him. I don't necessarily believe Nagy will design the offense around Malik Neighbors. So it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of role likely has. It might be a higher target volume than people realize as we move forward. And I'll say this about likely. I do think his skill set fits very well with Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart's best ability to me is his ability to layer the ball over the second level of defense in between the third in the intermediate area of the field, and specifically in the intermediate middle. We saw it a lot at Ole Miss. We saw it a lot last year with the Giants. It could be just a great fit all around there.
He's good, man. I know he wasn't good this past year, but I do think it was mostly the injuries. I watched all of his targets in 2024, and I was like, this is such a weird and interesting player. There's not really anybody who moves like him at tight ends. So the idea of him potentially getting like a close to full-time slot role is pretty interesting. I think this is about as good of a landing spot as he was going to get, where we feel good about Dart, and we'll see what happens in the draft in terms of them adding receivers. But I think there's a chance that he gets an opportunity to just be a playmaker for this team. And so there is a reason that people are excited about him. And you said Andrews, you think you'll be higher than consensus?
I'll be higher than consensus than Andrews too. It'll be another Kelsey type buy.
He's
for
your
me.
Kelsey this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like, it's a small win, more than likely who could be a big win.
Yeah. All right. I think those are the winners of QB and tight end. Is like Willis is a winner. He got a starting job, and it's a decent one where he's got weapons. And then I think Jacoby Brissett, if he ends up getting this starting job, is like a clear win for anybody playing in Superflex leagues. Decent weapons there in Arizona. And then at tight end, if Brissett's still in there, that's a clear win for McBride. I was a little nervous that somebody like Malik Willis was going to end up there, like where it's a much lower volume passing, like I just talked about with Jalen Waddle. Is like, I don't know, man, if they're only going to drop back 29 times a game, like that's going to be pretty tough when you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson and Trey McBride. I just don't know how McBride could possibly get to the target numbers he's had, but I feel decent about it. If it's still Brissett, I feel pretty good about it. And then I think Tyler Warren is the other one to mention. I do think he's a winner. I'm not pushing him up near Loveland or anything like that, but I do think he benefits from them moving up from Pittman, and that's probably a signal that they feel pretty good about adding to his role in year 2. All right. The big free agents that we've got our eyes on going forward, still available. Stephon Diggs, low-key had a good year. I was a little surprised that the Patriots cut him.
I think that's got to be off the field related.
Yeah, maybe. I've wondered if he might end up back with them, but yeah, I've got no idea what's going on there, because he tweeted and was positive about it. Like, said that it seems like things are still good there with them, but we'll see. Diggs, I think, still has some juice. At least that's what he showed last year. We'll see where he ends up.
One note that might change that. Some breaking news that just happened a second ago. The Patriots signed Romeo Doubs to a 3-year, $60 million deal. So that will probably or potentially impact their possibility of re-signing Diggs.
Yes, that is big news. Okay, so yeah, they've been tied to Alec Pierce. They didn't get him, and then they've been tied to A.J. Brown in trade rumors, and potentially Brian Thomas Jr. They end up with Romeo Doubs, who is a clear role, like as an ex-receiver. That's really interesting. So I think he fills that role for them. And with Diggs, I think this is good for Kyle Williams, man. Like, if they settle on Dobbs and don't end up making a trade for one of those two more like superstar types of receivers, then we've got potentially Williams playing kind of the Diggs role, with Booty and Dobbs as the field stretchers. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so Dobbs was one of the top names still available. Maybe that's good for Matthew Golden as well.
Yes.
Dobbs is somebody that they've really liked. Definitely curious to see how Green Bay's receiver room will shake out, because Wicks is somebody that's been rumored as a trade target. Okay, so the other receivers that are available that are interesting is Juwan Jennings, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, Darnell Mooney, Christian Kirk, and Keenan Allen.
Yep.
And then at tight end, it's David Njoku, Dallas Goedert, and Chigozium Okonkwo. They added Bellinger, Daniel Bellinger, your guy from New York.
Big contract too.
Yeah, surprisingly big contract. Him and Wandale going there makes it feel like they're not going to bring Okonkwo back. So I'm curious to see where he'll land. Obviously, Dallas Goedert's a really good player, even this late in his career. I think he's been really good. And then Njoku, if healthy, we know can be really, really productive. So I'm really curious to see where those two tight ends land. So keep an eye on that. But I think that's a good job wrapping up pretty much all the free agency news. It's been...
Well, one more thing we missed we didn't miss. It just happened a few minutes ago as well. Geno Smith was traded to the Jets.
Okay.
Probably going to start there too. I can't believe.
Godspeed, Geno.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be
horrible
Derek
situation
Carr.
to
I thought it was going to be Derek Carr with the
No.
Jets. The Jets are hilarious.
It's sad.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe Geno gets his swag back, and I don't know. Is AD Mitchell even going to be there? Like, who's even going to be there? I mean,
I don't know.
Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
Maybe this is good for Garrett Wilson. I don't know. It's better than it could have been.
Yeah, it's better than Fields and
Yeah.
the kid from Missouri playing again for Brady
My
Cook.
gosh. Yeah. All right, Dad. Good stuff today. You got anything else on free agents, or are you ready to get out of here?
No, excited to get back, talk more free agents with you Thursday, as you mentioned, and then we're going to get back into a lot more as we roll through the offseason. Thank you so much to everyone who has listened today. Even more importantly, thank you to everyone who subscribed to the channel. Please, you need to get this channel off the ground with your help. Build the community out like we built it last year over on the FFT channel, but now again this year on our own channel. So hit the subscribe button, comment and like on every and any video you can. That really helps us grow. And then hype button. That's the last new thing that YouTube's kind of put out there to help channels and creators grow. It's 4 things we asked for, but all 4 things should take you under a minute to do.
Hype it up for sure. Dude, we've got like this new channel or small channel or something boost where it's like, I think a hype is worth like 15,000, where it used to be like 500.
Okay.
So it's like way more. So like if you can hype it up to 3 times. If you really just want to cheese this, you can like hype and then leave the video and come back and hype it again. So give us all the hype, please. We're trying to get the word out, get people to go beyond the box score with us. Thank you all for being here.
And as a self-proclaimed plug god, I do apologize for not knowing that information about the hype button before Jacob let me know. But now that we know, hit that hype button, please. Get us rolling here. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.